Wait, do you mean cute as in physically cute, or cute as in she has like just adorable phrases?
Adorable. Just an adorable planner.
Yeah. Well,
I'll give her this.
The
dog thing was cute. The dog thing was cute. That was for
real. That was a big controversy inside, that she wasn't more of a fighter. Like some people inside of her campaign wanted her to be blood and teeth.
That's because Elizabeth Warren just needs to be a bit more upfront about her feelings and a little bit more pugilistic. That's the issue there. Yeah.
She should have leaned into the dog, because it sure worked for Jim Justice and Baby Dog.
Yeah. It was a smart
Baby
campaign
Dog's
move.
a cuter dog than Bailey is.
But I get like promoting first dog. That was a smart move. That was a good campaign. I'm surprised it didn't do better, to be honest with you.
Probably because she's a bad candidate.
That'd be the main thing. I think the big problem with Elizabeth Warren was people didn't want to vote for her. That was the big problem.
I think it was literally she had a constituency in New York and Los Angeles, so she had enough money to be very unpopular with everybody else in the country.
I voted for her in Massachusetts. I was happy to do so.
You want to know what? There we go. I forgot one of the constituencies. New York, Massachusetts, and Los Angeles.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, Lizzie Warren talk. I have an update for you guys.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We covered on the podcast many months ago a bakery in New Hampshire who had a free speech case because the city has no signs allowed, no advertising. So they painted a mural on their donut shop that had all these pastries arising from a sunrise, and they were told to take it down because it was an advertisement because it matched the color scheme of their legally allowed sign. They have now won their free speech case. They are allowed to keep the mural.
I love the mural. I'm happy to hear that.
In New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
Weirdly, I think I was more skeptical of this than the both of you. However, I thought about it, and like, if the Catholic Church did this, it would apply to them as well, right? Like, if the Catholic Church in Concord had a big mural of Jesus on the sign, you could say like,
rising from a sunrise.
You could go, that's advertising. You're advertising Catholicism. That's illegal. And we would be like, no, you can't. That's stupid, right? But if a guy wants to have donuts in a very paradisical way, we're like, well, that's advertising. So I'm with them on this. Plus, also fuck local zoning boards in their face. Just fuck.
I'm sure there are crosses outside of churches. So if you really wanted to be a dick about it, you could say that that's an advertisement because it's their brand. Mm-hmm. So I think it actually argues for the mural, what's already allowed.
I think
that's what I mean. I think
that religious speech has a few more protections than commercial speech in general.
It does. But I think you could I'm just saying if we're going to be, the argument that was put forward by that board was, hey, we're applying the law equally everywhere, even to the donut guy we like. And if they actually were going to apply it equally everywhere, then as Jen points out, if you had a cross in front of your church, are you not advertising your church? So when in doubt, default on private property rights.
And cute murals made out of donuts. I still just like the mural.
Because it was painted by kids, right?
It was so
by,
cute.
Local children.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a hard one in front of a jury to win when you're the zoning board and there's like a bunch of kids with paint on their fingers.
Yeah, and you're gonna have to send some dude with the white paint to paint it over while children cry.
Yeah, that's right.
Bad scene.
Yep, and then he'll just go, "Don't worry, this makes the houses worth more, but it makes rent cost more. Go away." Housing zoning boards.
From Austin, Texas, I'm Justin Robert Young. From Southern California,
I'm Jen Briney.
And from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C.,
Andrew Heaton.
And we're not wrong on this edition of the program. We will be discussing the US-Nippon Steel deal. Is it solid or a sellout? We will also be discussing the government changing COVID booster recommendations, as well as your emails on the show. Heaton, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excellent.
Yeah.
I'm going.
Everything's fine.
Jeez. Anything notable? between last week and this week that you'd like to share with the class?
Certainly do not. How are you doing, Justin? What's up in your world?
What don't I know?
I don't know.
Nah, everything's fine. Let's talk about Justin for a minute.
I'm doing fine. We have a big trip, the first plane ride for my baby daughter tomorrow.
Are there, okay, when I was a little kid, my mom would have me chew gum in the rare instance that we went on a plane in order to trick me into popping my ears. Mm-hmm. But your daughter's quite wee. So like, do they make like a pacifier that pumps air into their mouth? Kind of like one of those things for, like a CPAP machine? Do they make one of those for babies so they don't cry? Because we're in the future. We live in the future now.
Mm-hmm. I think a pacifier does the trick.
Does it? Why are there crying babies on airplanes? We've had those for years.
Yeah, and they all had little CPAP machines.
Yeah.
You're laughing. I'm going to make $1 million with my bullshit CPAP pacifier. Listeners, want to use capital money? Come hang out with Heaton. We're going to make a killing.
Tiny CPAP machines for babies on flight.
Assuming it doesn't pop their lungs, assuming that it's not deadly, we can make a lot of money.
I mean, if you really want the babies to not cry, you just need like a little bit, what's it called? Like chloroform?
Yeah.
Knock them out. Mm-hmm. That's the
baby
trick.
chloroform.
Yeah.
For kids.
Infant chloroform. Yeah, chloroform
water
for
down.
Kids.
It's fine.
Exactly. No, we don't. Look, we're gonna find out, man. This is gonna be interesting, and we have, to be totally honest, this trip tomorrow is going to tell us a lot more about how brave we want to be. We already have one booked flight for a tour of the baby around my wife's family in Ohio, but I don't know. We're going to find out. This is really, I was telling Jen before we started recording, the biggest problem is that our baby is an Olympic level elite sleeper right now. Like just solid sleep to the point where it's unrelatable to other parents. And that makes them mad at my wife and I. But will this trip knock her off that? Will she now be a spottier sleeper? I don't know. We'll all find out together. And then eventually maybe find something out about Andrew Heaton so he doesn't deflect and just move it on to other people.
Wait, so you're going to Ohio, you say?
Oh, Jesus. Let's just get to the topics. The revised US-Nippon Steel agreement transforms what was originally a full $14.1 billion foreign acquisition of U.S. Steel into a strategic partnership with limited ownership. Facing intense political and union backlash, the new deal allows Nippon Steel of Japan to invest in U.S. Steel without gaining control. The company will remain headquartered in Pittsburgh with American board leadership and includes promises of domestic investment and job protections. Critics, however, remain unconvinced. National security hawks argue that allowing any foreign stake in a critical defense-linked industry like steel poses long-term risks, especially with scrutiny over Nippon's ties to China. Labor unions, particularly United Steelworkers, strongly oppose the deal, citing distrust in foreign ownership and concerns about potential job losses. They point to past acquisitions where initial promises to protect workers were later broken. Others criticize the opacity of the arrangement. While marketed as a compromise, the specifics of decision-making power, governance, and future commitments remains vague. Even with added protections like the U.S. government having a golden share to veto major moves, skepticism persists about whether the structure truly prevents foreign influence. Mr. Andrew Heaton, compared to a full buyout, which was opposed by both Joe Biden and now President Donald Trump in the election, does this represent a good deal, or is it a bunch of kabuki theater?
I don't think kabuki theater would be the right analogy to use because this strikes me more Mussolini, and I'll get to that in a minute. No, I don't think this is a very good deal. So here's where I'm looking at the situation. U.S. Steel has struggled financially for several years now. I don't know, 20, 30 years. And that is in part because they are using older blast furnaces, whereas the rest of the industry moved on to electric arc furnaces, which are a lot cheaper and use fewer people. And so, which by the way is why we have fewer people working in steel than we did back in the 1960s or whatever. So they're lagging behind in that. And they need capital in order to modernize. And you get capital one of two ways. You either get capital by creating new stock. You build a factory and everybody goes, look, everybody want to create 5 more units of stock because Mitch is building a factory. We're going to cut Mitch in. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is you sell the company and another company buys you and they inject capital into it. That was originally what Nippon Steel was going to do. They're going to move in, purchase it, and then presumably add capital to it, update things, modernize it, and bring in needed capital. Now, this was opposed by unions for the reasons you bring up, Justin. Unions, I think, rightly are worried that this would result in renegotiating agreements that they have with the current leadership. And that means that there might be jobs that are let go, or there might be jobs that just aren't created in the future as they modernize. And so they didn't want to do that. Plus, we're getting into the weeds here, but I think US Steel uses the older pension model, whereas its competitors use 401ks. So they want to make sure that's there. So they're worried about that. Joe Biden steps in when he's president and says, we're just not going to let the merger happen because I, Joe Biden, have decided that this is a national security issue, not
Union
CFIUS,
Joe.
not the actual bodies that assess these things, who would not have said it was a national security issue because Japan is a close ally. The Nippon is publicly traded, and they already own multiple steel mills in America. It's not a national security issue. It's fine, but that was the pretext to scuttle a deal that Joe didn't like. Trump comes in, and he doesn't like it because insofar as his industrial policy exists, it consists of something like, it's really good if burly dudes bang metal objects together with sparks. How can we make more sparks? That's what we want to do. So they've put their foot on this to make this go in a different direction. And the result is, I'm going to read a quote from Senator McCormick of Pennsylvania. We're going to essentially require U.S. government approval of a number of board members, and that will allow the United States to ensure that production levels aren't cut. They're also talking about having a golden share, which is what they do in China, where the government owns a controlling interest in the company. So we're taking a private company. We're now going to put Uncle Sam on the board in some capacity, either indirectly, where you have to approve the leadership of the company through the federal government and Trump, or we're just going to have actual people from the federal government sit on the board. And they're going to make political decisions as opposed to economic decisions in order to get to political outcomes rather than what actually is more efficient. That's state capitalism. I think it's a really bad direction for us to be moving. I think all of this was unnecessary. This is a bad deal. It should have just been allowed to go through.
Jen?
Good job, Andrew. I knew that you would research this one. As soon as I saw the topic, I was like, this is an Andrew topic.
Thank you, Jen.
Okay, so I just find the whole thing weird. And the entire time I was reading up on it, I just kept thinking TikTok, because I think that is where the precedent for this was set, because they are trying to do this weird thing where you have the foreign ownership, but you don't, and the US kind of controls it. But the big difference for me with this one is that it's not an adversary country that's involved here. It's Japan. They're our allies. And so I just found it like a really weird structure based on how they were doing what they were doing with TikTok. And the only scenario in which I have advocated for something like this was when we bailed out the banks in the auto industry, where it was like, okay, like we're taking my tax dollars and giving it to these companies that like I'm not choosing to support. I actually think the banks should have failed. But like, fine, if you're going to do that, I do think us taxpayers should have some kind of ownership structure in it until we get repaid with interest. And then it can go back to being a private company. But it was basically a way for us to get paid back for what we had given them. That is not what this is. And when I think about the reasons that they're saying that they're doing it, national security, okay, steel is something that we need. So I guess you can say that we're protecting a vital resource, but we're not in a situation now where it is a resource that we don't have. And if we ever got to that point, like if we're in a war or something, we can just eminent domain it. So to say that it's a national security issue right now, I also agree with Andrew here, where it just smells like bullshit. And so, yeah, I just find it like a really weird thing to do. And it also just goes against what we have said. Now, I'm not sure I completely agree with what we've been doing in the world, but what we've been doing in the world is pushing free trade on everyone. And so saying that it is natural and good to allow foreign companies to come into the United States and own our resources outright. Now, is that smart? I don't know. That's a debate for another day. But what we have stood for in the world is that so that our companies can then go to Japan and own their resources outright. So it's kind of like a mutual thing. And so we are changing that arrangement. I'm not terribly surprised that Trump is doing that because he's wanted to unravel that system that we built. But it's just another example of us being hypocrites. And it does seem like a step towards the merging of corporations and government, which smells of Mussolini. So
state capitalism. We're not supposed to call it fascism anymore because everybody gets really worked up. But economically, that's state capitalism.
Yeah. And it's, like I said, it's weird. I'm uncomfortable with it, but not to the level where I'd be like, it's wrong. Because again, it is a resource. It's just, I think there's other resources that would make more sense to me for national security reasons than steel. It does seem to be a way to please the unions more than.
We're going to see the exact, we don't know fully what the agreement's going to be. It's all very opaque right now, but the way they're talking with golden shares does really worry me. What they do in China, which is also a state capitalist model, they're not really socialist anymore, is you have private companies, but you have the government own 51% of the stock in the large companies that they give a shit about so that the government can override whatever they're going to do economically if they want to go in a different direction. It's a way of the government being able to control what the private sector does.
That is the reason why people don't take TikTok seriously when they talk about being a company that is headquartered in Singapore and doesn't have connections to the CCP, is because TikTok is owned by Douyin, and Douyin does have a golden share with the Chinese Communist Party. And so when people are like, hand waving away what TikTok explains their ownership structure is, the golden share is part of it.
Yeah, that's fair. And I should say the British did this for a while too. Like, just because I'm doing a little bit of fear-mongering here by invoking China, but the British did this when they privatized a bunch of companies and weirdly Rolls-Royce or something for some reason had government shares for a while. I'm okay with actually the situation that Jen brought up. I don't think I would have bailed the banks out either. But if we're going to do it, I'd rather it be we're purchasing the taxpayer is purchasing shares as opposed to a bailout. You just get the money. Like I said earlier, if there's two ways to infuse capital. Either you buy the whole thing or you create more stock and you go, we've opened a new wing, so we're going to create 5,000 more shares of stock. If the government does that, if we're going to go down that route and it's a temporary thing where we get them on their feet, get the money back, as Jen said, I'm all right with it. I want the government to stay out of the bedroom. I want the government to stay out of the boardroom. There are things the government should be doing economically in terms of safety, fraud, contract, negative externalities. I don't want it trying to set policy of where do we want to put the next steel mill, because that's not going to be based on where is steel coming from that's efficient. It's going to be based on, well, whose district is it? Is this something that, like they said, that the point of this is we want to ensure production levels aren't cut. Well, what if it makes sense to move production in another direction, or it makes sense to the market moves towards aluminum instead of steel? These should not be political decisions in the American system.
Well, and I also want to point out that this all started in the Biden administration. He was the one that was kind of pushing for this. There was also precedent in the Biden administration with the semiconductor bill that he signed into law, because we are basically paying to create a semiconductor industry here in the United States. And it was another one of those, this is where I was advocating for we should get shares in those companies, because we're giving them billions and billions of dollars of our tax money and we have no stake in getting any of that back when it's up and running. So that's where I was also thinking, if we're going to pay to start these things, we should get some kind of return, or at least get our money back. Even if it zeroes out and we make nothing in interest, we should at least get our money back. That was not the deal that they made. So it's like this.
That was the CHIPS Act you're talking about.
The CHIPS Act, yeah. And that's one of the things that Biden calls one of his signature achievements was to essentially insert the government into this private industry and have us prop it up with our tax money. And I was furious when I read that bill. And so this kind of reeks of the same thing, but different.
Yeah. All right. A few things are at play here. Number one, the name US Steel.
God, yes. That's
this is basically if there were a company called American Hero and it was Japan buys American Hero, there are an optics here that would just simply not exist if this were Construction Dynamics being acquired by Nippon Steel. If it were that it would be what it is. I don't think that we would see the interaction. Number two, there are few things that embody the decline of the Midwest and the creation of the Rust Belt like the steel industry of Pittsburgh. And so it is, if you are concerned, let's say in an election year where Pennsylvania is a swing state, that you are on the side of the giant sucking sound that is taking your job away from these once proud American industries like the collapsing steel industry of Pittsburgh, which, by the way, has collapsed my entire life. And now Pittsburgh is totally redefined itself as a hub for medical technology and many other things for which it is on the rise for. But if you are looking at it from a boomer perspective, the quickest way to lose Pennsylvania is to let the foreigners continue to buy and hollow out the great American industry of steel in the city of Pittsburgh.
Sorry.
Yeah. If it weren't for those things, I think this merger just would have gone through and nobody would have given a rat's ass about it. Like, yes, there's a union component to it. But how much do the unions have a say in anything? I mean, obviously the union leadership is totally disconnected from its membership these days. And this election really laid that bare. But honestly, if this were a different name, I don't think anybody would give a rat's ass.
I think you're very much onto something with that. I think we've entered a period of American history where idiot dick swinging is now a significant amount of our economic thought, where, this is the naming the Gulf of America thing, where people go, yeah, we did it. Good job, everybody. And I think it obscures the underlying reality. Like, now I don't know Pittsburgh specifically, but US Steel hasn't cratered. I mean, American Steel has not cratered. It's not that we don't make steel anymore. It's that we're way more efficient with steel, in the same way that we've gone from having 80% of the population of the United States working in farms to 2% of the pop. It's not that we don't make food anymore. We make more food than we ever have, but farmers are incredibly efficient at it. And that's what happened back in the 1980s with electric arc welders. Was they're more efficient and they don't require as many people. And so the level of steel production, it's fluctuated, but it hasn't declined as much as the jobs have, because it's just an automation issue. And then you get into these foreigners buy it stuff. And I do think it's very blustery, chauvinistic nonsense. Like, we had this whenever anybody wanted to buy like a car company in the States, that we get pushback on this, where what is like Honda or Kia wanted to start building factories in the States, maybe in the 2000s. And you look at it and you're like, they're employing Americans at those factories to sell cars to Americans.
Yeah.
The company is publicly traded. You can buy stock in it if you want. It's just that most of the stockholders happen to be in Asia. That's the predominant thing. But it's not as if it's something that's just this Death Star that's completely separate from the American economy. And it's good that we have these interactions.
That panic very much defined the 80s, right? The 80s were defined by the idea that Japan was going to take over all American industry, and it was all over for us. And the auto industry was a huge part of it.
There were I would watch Captain Kangaroo and stuff. And if you watch too long, like it got to 1 o'clock in Oklahoma, like the Japanese Chamber of Commerce would just buy advertisements for like, fear not, Japan. And it would just be like an hour long, like, Japan is your friend. Don't worry. People were freaked out about that. And what happened? Japan went into stagflation for 20 years. None of the fears that people were worried about happened with Japan anyway.
No.
Yeah. I don't know about this deal. I'm more sympathetic to the idea that the problem with steel in America isn't necessarily production. It is that we are priced out from foreign steel that is subsidized by its governments, like China. Like, Chinese steel is very, very cheap to import. And that, the argument from the American perspective is that A, China subsidizes it, and B, we need to be able to create enough steel in America that, let's say we went to war with China, we wouldn't be putting in purchase orders to our enemy to be like, hey, we need to build new ships now. That even if it is not the best in terms of the raw free trade principles, maybe there is a reason to have a protectionist bent on things like steel. But that being said, I don't think that that's what this is.
There's an argument to be made, a good argument, that there is a military supply chain that needs to be maintained, that there are certain things that are critical to national security that should be, we're going to accept a certain level of economic redundancy on, a certain level of economic drag. That is a fair argument to make. It's something that CFIUS goes into when it's looking at mergers and acquisitions. But insofar as the other countries subsidizing the steel, thanks, fuckers. You're taxing your own people to pay for it. We'll buy your cheap steel. Thanks for passing the costs on to your idiot people. Great. We'll take it. And then if we get to that point where we go to war with China, we've got a fuck ton of nukes and a lot of submarines. I think we're going to be okay while we figure things out. I'm not worried about it. And I think the way to staunch that is to keep trading with all these people. One of the reasons that we're such good allies with Japan is because we've got a very interconnected economy with them. Let's keep that going.
Well, if there is a giant war, I don't think that Japan's going to be on China's side. That's the part that blew me away. It's like, this isn't a Chinese company. What are we doing here? Like, who are we protecting our industry from? The worst thing I can say about this company, Nikon, is that they capitalize the O in their name.
Do they? Wait, what?
No.
Is it callback? Nice, Jid. Nice.
That was a Patreon bit. We can't bring the Patreon bits unless now we're making everybody who doesn't get the Patreon episodes feel very left out.
Well, they are left out. They should be paying for the Patreon. That's their fault, not mine.
Take that, audio barnacles.
Speaking of that, patreon.com/we're not wrong is where you get a bonus episode each and every week. Look, you listen to this show, you like it, you get to the end of it, and then you're lonely because like a one night stand, as soon as it's over, we're out the door and you're just left hanging in the breeze. But not our Patreon. No, they get a nice little audio cuddle going anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes where we talk about a whole other topic. By the time that they're done, boy, are they safe asleep in our oral embrace, AURAL. Patreon.com/we're not wrong. On this edition of the program, we're going to be discussing the liberal Joe Rogan. Who could it be? The Democrats are spending tens of millions of dollars to find out. We'll discuss that and more. Patreon.com/we're not wrong.
Justin, oral embrace sounds like a bodice ripper that I would write. It sounds like the title of an erotic thriller no one will read.
There was a wrestling podcast where a famous female announcer started it when she left one company, and she called it Oral Sessions, AURAL.
I like it.
Sessions. And then she wound up getting a job with another wrestling company on television and changed it to just the Sessions because it's like, not worth it. Not worth it to try to plug it on television and be like, hey, you.
Yeah. Now listen, when we say mouth hugs, we mean that you feel like you're getting hugged by the noises coming out of the mouth. That's a mouth hug.
In a New England Journal of Medicine article, Food and Drug Administration officials Dr. Vinay Prasad and Martin A. Mockery advocate for more individualized evidence-based approaches to COVID-19 vaccinations. Essentially, that means that the FDA is now going to not recommend COVID shots for pregnant women and healthy children under a certain age. That means that if it is off the recommended list from the federal government, that there might be a difference, and this is going to be depending on your own insurance, that insurance may or may not cover it. Critics argue that restricting vaccines to high-risk groups ignores scientific consensus on broader community protection, potentially increasing virus spread and mutation. The policy's deviation from established procedures and lack of input from advisory committees raises concerns, according to critics, about transparency and scientific integrity. Experts warn that requiring extensive trials for low-risk populations, which is the new threshold to see whether or not they will be put back on the recommended list, may delay access and erode trust in vaccination efforts. Jen, is this common sense or vaccine skepticism run amok, endangering our very nation?
So I'm uncomfortable with it because apparently, so I did a little extra research on this. Apparently there's a process that they generally do when they're going to change recommendations. And this was not at all what the process usually looks like. In fact, when it comes to the recommendations for children getting the vaccine, there were signs that they were on the way to maybe making a change to that. And there was a meeting scheduled in June for experts to actually weigh in and have conversations about that. And that was just completely skipped. And instead you get, RFK and two other people of the Trump picks that went up there and in a very unorthodox way went up there and changed the recommendations. Now, we're seeing a lot of talk about recommendations, but that's not really the issue. The issue is access. And that's where we have questions about what this actually means, because where it was announced like from a podium and not in documents really laying out what this means, we don't know if this means they're just changing the recommendations or if they're not going to allow the approval of these vaccines without these, longer term trials before they'll allow, children and pregnant women to take them. And the issue, from what I understand with that is, first of all, to do a long-term study, the virus can mutate while they're doing that. But then also, because there's been proof already that it is effective, these long-term studies might be unethical themselves because it means you're giving people a placebo when that doesn't work, when you have something that probably does. And so they don't even know if doing these studies is an okay thing to do. So there's just a lot of questions with this plan. But apparently, the children part of it is less controversial than the pregnant women part of it. From what I understand, pregnant women, and I'm getting a lot of this from what I'm about to say from The Daily, from the New York Times, but they were saying that pregnant women have been proven to be quite susceptible to COVID. And one of the reasons why they're thinking that you don't really need to give, babies the COVID vaccine is because a lot of them are getting the antibodies from their mother. Well, if you think about the chain there, if you're not giving the mother the vaccine, then the babies don't have it if the mother never had COVID. And so you're leaving the babies without the antibodies and then not allowing them to have the vaccine on top of it. We're also not sure if they're talking about just boosters or if they're talking about initial vaccines, because it's one thing to say that children don't need to be boosted over and over again, but they probably need the initial vaccine. And we don't know what they're going to actually remove access to. So it's there's so many questions with this that are concerning, especially, you do have to say RFK Jr. has been weird about vaccines for a very long time. So it's considering the source and his floofiness with facts. I'm concerned about it. And one of their strongest arguments, especially with removing the recommendations for children, is this just matches what other countries are doing. But other countries have universal health care. So if they want the vaccine and if there is access to it, they can just go get it. The difference between them and us.
Months. Yeah.
Yeah. The difference between them and us is that we have for-profit health insurance, which is a middleman for us. And so by removing the recommendation, that removes the insurance industry's legal requirement to cover it. And therefore, people that don't have the means to buy it out of pocket might not have access. So it's all about cutting off access. In those other countries, if you want the vaccine, you can get it. It's approved. And so that's what's different for us is the recommendation is one thing. It's the access that matters. And there are signs that access will be cut off for a lot of people. And I haven't taken a booster. If I'm going to be honest, I haven't taken a booster since 2021. I got the initial 2 vaccines and just 1 booster. And I've been, fine ever since. I wasn't planning to take the vaccine, but I liked that I could if I wanted to. There is some news out of Asia.
You would still be available for it. If you got pregnant
right now,
insurance might not cover it.
Yeah, right now I can get it, but that's what the question is.
You are afraid that this is getting further eroded.
Well, so there's a list of things. They said we still recommend it for adults that have a list of comorbidities. I don't have any of them. And so if you're saying that the recommendation would take away my insurance's legal responsibility to cover it for me unless I am obese or depressed or all the things that were on the list. By the way, long COVID, not on the list, which is weird. But if you don't have one of these, then your access can be cut if you can't pay for it out of pocket. So that's the concern. Right now, if I want it, I can get it. If anyone, any person over the age of 6 months, if you want it, you can get it. And that's what's changing right now is that they're taking the choice Possibly. If it's just a change in recommendation, that's one thing. But because of the insurance connection to the recommendation, if you're taking access away from people, you're taking choice away from people. And I'm pretty sure that's what these people were all squawking about during the pandemic. Is like, it should be our choice. And now they're taking their choice away from us. So that's where I find this hypocritical and stupid. And just the lack of a process is concerning to me.
This got brought up to us by way of a listener who asked whether or not it made you reconsider your thoughts on RFK becoming Health and Human Secretary.
Okay, let me explain this again. So when it came to RFK, there was one aspect of him where I said, we might have something good come out of this. And that is, he seemed to be concerned about food safety. There were 2 hearings that I watched where they talked about food safety, chemicals that are allowed in our food. I've always been worried about glyphosate. I always say it wrong, but the shit that's in Roundup. I've been worried about the fact that that stuff seems to cause cancer, and yet it remains out there because it's, it makes plants grow very fast and farmers love it and agribusiness loves it. So I'm concerned about that stuff. And RFK Jr. has said for a long time that he is too. So after the election happened, when I was looking for any silver lining, I did say maybe this would be a good thing. I never once endorsed anything RFK said about vaccines. So you can be concerned about a person in one aspect and have some kind of optimism in another. Now, the food thing remains to be seen. I don't know. But this is concerning when it comes to vaccines. I was just looking for any positive thing to maybe something good will come out of this. But yes, I've always been concerned about RFK Jr. and vaccines. And I said it in both of those episodes. So, yeah, that's what I get for trying to be optimistic about anything during the Trump years.
Thanks for the endorsement, Jen Heaton.
A few things. Jen raised a lot of good points, and maybe will sway me to that perspective, but I'm not really bothered by this. A couple of things. We would need to talk more about the access issue because I don't know that much about it. I think Jen knows more than I do in terms of the relationship between insurance companies and the HHS and what they recommend. I don't think that it automatically means that in other countries, because they have universal health care, that everybody can get access to anything that is approved, because they're still rationing things. Like, in effect, we're having the HHS ration things on a basis of insurance. They still ration stuff in other countries. So it wouldn't surprise me if in the United Kingdom, it's harder to get a particular vaccine if the government says you don't need it. I could be wrong on that, but I'd want to know more. Where I come from on this is preface. I like Bhattacharya. I think Bhattacharya is a good pick. I am glad that he's there.
NIH head, Bhattacharya. Jay Bhattacharya.
He's the head of NIH in a very Return of the Jedi move for the guy that authored in part the Great Barrington Declaration. I am very skeptical of RFK for all the reasons talked about. Like, he is a vaccine skeptic. I listened to his long interview with Joe Rogan, and it's not just that he wants more safety involved. Like, he openly questions the efficacy of the polio vaccine and things like that. So he does worry me. But in terms of this actual statement that's come out, I think that 2 things are afoot. One, we approached COVID rightly as we got to skip the proceduralism and get shit done. It's why we were able to get the vaccine out in 8 months, a year and a half, whatever that was. Really, really. Normally, that kind of thing takes much, much, much longer because we have to make it subject it to a number of trials, subject it to a number of redundancies. When you get a drug out to market, you then have to have further trials because the sample size is so large. And we basically just skipped that stuff to make the COVID vaccine because, I think rightly, the rationale was this is such a deadly disease going around that we've got to skip the normal proceduralism and get it done. Now that we're past that, now that we're over the hump, it makes sense to me that we would go to a very methodical place where we do test things, where we don't shoot from the hip, where we go, we need to have evidence in order to promote this particular thing. A quote from the statement that was given from HHS is, "We simply don't know whether a healthy 52-year-old woman with a normal BMI who has had COVID 3 times and has received 6 previous doses of the COVID-19 vaccine will benefit from the 7th dose." That sounds good to me. I am okay with them taking a breather and doing trials to ensure that we're recommending things which are actually effective rather than recommending things out of fear. That's where we were Now I want them to take a minute and do randomized trials, do all of those things. That makes sense to me. The other thing that I'll add is the medical establishment needs to earn my trust back. I think the medical establishment in America really dropped the ball. They did a good job developing the vaccine very quickly, and they deserve due credit for that. But in terms of the relationship with the American people, I don't really trust these folks anymore. I did, but that got tarnished. The Great Barrington Declaration, in retrospect, I think made a lot of sense. The people who wrote it went, "Hey, this is a disease which targets the old." Can you
refresh people on that in case they are not up to date?
The Great Barrington Declaration was a Bhattacharya and 2 or 3 other doctors from Harvard and Yale. I mean, these were not crackpots. These were people well established. They wrote a statement going, "Hey, COVID is most deadly to people that are immunocompromised and over the age of 65, rather than shutting down the economy indefinitely and shutting kids out of school indefinitely and having everybody participate in lockdown. What we ought to do is focus on the people that are the most at risk. And that would be, having like grocery store hours from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. for people that are immunocompromised, or doing things to accommodate them and protect them, as opposed to treating it for everybody in a big way." And they were heralded as evil, reckless, irresponsible people that were going to result in bodies in the streets. And
Genesis.
They were, it was, and we ended up, I have a certain amount of latitude for the beginning of the pandemic when we didn't know what it was, and it made sense to be overly cautious. I think the flatten the curve thing made total sense. But the further we got in, we were making big policy decisions that were not only not based on scientific inquiry, but were opposed to it, were refuted by the scientific data we had as we went further on, and we were lied to about it. We had, anybody that said the lab leak theory. One of the episodes I was more worried about doing my program, which in retrospect is very banal, was I brought on Matt Ridley and his co-author to talk about the lab leak, and that was fucking red hot at the time. Mm-hmm. Like they were catching flack everywhere. They were super racist. So now it's like, yeah, it's probably what happened. And we've got the leaked emails from people that were on the teams dealing with this that are like, yeah, I think it might be this, but we covered it up. I say all of this not in the sense that you just shouldn't believe doctors. It's not what I'm saying. But in terms of the medical establishment, I do think that it makes sense to put some effort into convincing the American people that, hey, we're doing this. We're actually dotting I's, crossing T's. We're going through this. We are making sure that when we recommend a thing to you, we are confident in that recommendation. So that's kind of where I'm at.
That makes a lot of sense to me, except the fact that they skipped the whole process with the scientists. Can you
elaborate on the process? Because I don't
really know the details about it. I just know that there was supposed to be a meeting in June where they were going to discuss whether or not they should change the recommendation for children. And instead, RFK Jr. and 2 other people, one of whom was not Jay Bhattacharya, actually. He was not on the podium with them. But these 3 just went up there and just did it, which is so very Trump administration, because they seem to just do things. And so it's like, I'm with you on everything you said about them losing my trust and having to gain it back. But by not going through the proper channels and bringing the scientists into this decision with them and just kind of doing it with the political appointees, that's where it's further eroding my trust and not making me trust that they've actually looked into us. Because like they say they want the studies of the vaccines, but then to skip the process with the actual scientists, like that's
I would need to know whether we're talking about skipping a bureaucratic process or a scientific process. And I don't know enough to answer that question. If this is a situation where we're talking about proceduralism within the administration, I'm not as bothered by that. By the way, I'm totally shooting from the hip. I don't know what the process is. I don't know what the procedure is. I could 100% be wrong. But I could see a situation where the previous administration went, we've decided that everybody needs to get a booster every year. And the procedure to rectify that is to have a big meeting and talk about it. And they're going, we're just not going to do that. We're going to start from ground zero in terms of randomized trials until we build up to it. So I could, if they're skipping the bureaucratic proceduralism of it, that doesn't bother me, depending on what it meant in the first place. If they're skipping the scientific side, that would bother me.
I guess when I just look at the figures that are making this announcement, the people that are doing the skipping, it's these vaccine skeptics that have been appointed by Donald Trump. It's them making this decision. So had the stamp of approval by anyone who is not them, I feel like I'd be more willing to trust that it's safe. But because it is them,
so
it does
nothing is safe from polarization.
well, not this. Certainly not this. This has never been safe from polarization. And like, it's RFK Jr. We do have to consider the source here. So when he's the one standing up there being like, yeah, we can skip this process, it's fine, it makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. And I think for justified reasons.
Yeah. The one thing that I would say if I were playing skeptic here is what were the long, laborious processes that put these shots on the schedule to begin with?
Well, I think we
that was
skipped them initially. That was the thing.
Yeah.
We shortcutted them.
Yeah.
So like, you know, if the point is let's make sure that these things are effective, then at some point you have to make a decision, and it's either going to be doubling down on a process that had no considered research, or you are going to continue with, you know, doubling down on that decision until you make another decision, or you're going to stop putting it on the schedule and then do the research to figure out what it is.
But can't we do both? Because right now there's no state in which the vaccines are mandated. It's all by choice. So can't you make them available still while still doing the studies?
Well,
I don't see why it has to be removed.
This is where we get into the larger question, right? Because what is the direct relationship between the shots being recommended by the government versus available for people who would like to take them? And that is a more opaque question than I think anybody who is really sure on this wants to be able to answer, because it involves whether or not the insurance companies will cover it. They're certainly not going to be mandated to cover it. Will there be a demand to cover it? We don't know. It is interesting.
Well, the financial calculus, if the insurance companies are freed from having to cover it by this recommendation going away, would be, does it cost us more to provide the vaccines than it costs to treat COVID? And at this point, people are getting COVID and not even testing to see if they have COVID. And so I don't know what the financial calculus will be, but I suspect that these companies don't want to keep paying for the vaccines, because remember, they also changed the price. As soon as the emergency declaration went away, they were allowed to charge more. So it's not cheap anymore either. So these insurance companies want out of it. We've got a administration that is in the pocket of big business. So I do see a scenario here where this is a favor to the insurance industry because they don't want to pay for these fucking things anymore.
But also the other side of this is being in the pocket of big pharma, right? And making sure that their gravy train keeps going. So I don't know if
but RFK Jr. has been fighting big pharma for a very long time.
Yeah, I guess my point is I don't think that there's a clean corporate versus anti-corporate angle to this.
But I could see there being one. I could see there being one here.
What's the anti-corporate angle to we're mandating the shot versus we are not mandating?
Well, like I said, there is no mandate of the shot right now. It's all voluntary, but it's due the insurance companies.
Yes,
if it's insurance versus pharma, and RFK hates pharma, then saying that the insurance companies don't have to pay pharma anymore kind of goes along with the way he's operated for a long time. I agree with
you. But my point is that that's not anti-corporate. That is Godzilla versus King Kong.
Yes, I know. But it is an example of them like picking a corporation and being like, we're going to do you a favor here. I could see that being part of the calculus. That's all I'm saying.
A couple of things. If we're going to have the government making recommendations, I want it to be based on a preponderance of evidence rather than defaulting on we're not sure, so take the shot. Yeah. Again, I am a semi-successful quasi-comedian who does not know medicine, et cetera, et cetera. Doctors, I recommend, or please let me know where I'm wrong on this. I'm sure that there's stuff that I don't know on this. But the quote I read earlier, we don't know whether a 52-year-old woman with normal BMI who's had COVID 3 times and multiple doses of the vaccine will benefit from an additional dose. I think that that's a valid question to say. And if we don't know the answer to that, I would prefer that the government not make a definitive statement on it until they know. I would err on the side of evidence. If they're not doing that, by the way, then do it. Like, we should be erring on the side of evidence. The other thing I throw out too is that like you have the financing is a big part of this equation in American healthcare, but you can go in different directions. So you can go in potentially maladaptive directions. So you have situations where in Medicare, doctors will give unnecessary recommendations for procedures because it's getting covered by a third party. And so you'll have situations occasionally where actually by a large statistical amount, where older people will have recommended procedures that they don't need. They might theoretically benefit from them. It's an exploratory surgery or something like that, but it'll invite complications. So if you just say, everything has to have access, it can potentially end up causing problems by having unnecessary things happen. And that could happen with vaccines as well.
But for this particular vaccine, I don't know of any real evidence of it harming this 52-year-old woman who wants her 7th booster. So if it's not causing any harm and she wants it, should she have access to it?
Are we talking about a vaccine or a booster? Because like that.
The booster, yes. Because what they're saying is like a 52-year-old woman who's been vaccinated, she's got 6 boosters. We just don't know if the 7th is going to do anything for her. But should it be her choice whether or not to take the 7th? Or should it be RFK Jr.'s?
It should totally be her choice whether she wants to take it or not.
Exactly.
But
they're not banning it.
Some people might not. If you don't have access, that's the same thing as a ban.
Okay,
right.
Yes, but if the government, it's important that we make that clear, that we are not, that it is not a ban.
Right. If the government doesn't know that it's efficacious with a booster shot, I don't want the government to lie about that. I want it to say we have evidence to X point and not make a recommendation beyond that point. She should have access to it, but the government should be able to back up anything it recommends.
Which I 100% agree with. I just feel like if they want to do these studies, they should do those first and then change their recommendation. What they're doing now is changing the recommendation and then doing the studies. And so as far as we know, the science hasn't really changed. And by changing the recommendation, you're changing the access that people will get. And I think that if you're the patient that wants that shot in your arm and you can't afford it, and you like, who even knows if the doctors are going to have it? If this changes, like if your access is there, you don't really give a fuck whether it was a recommendation change or an access change. It feels like a ban because you can't get it. And that's the effect that I think I'm concerned
scenario.
About. It's not hypothetical. It's happening. Like we know that there is
happening.
Yes, we know.
This announcement happened 5 days ago.
Yes. And the issue is that a change in recommendation equals a change in access. We just don't know exactly how. And so that's the issue. That's what everyone is questioning. And so that's why I think that this isn't like just a hypothetical, like this recommendation will have an effect.
I agree.
That can feel like a ban.
The effect is. And the scenario that you painted was the hypothetical I was talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually don't know what we're arguing about, Justin. So
me either.
Okay.
Here's one thing I will say about rebuilding trust, and a silver lining to the Trump administration putting very intensely polarizing people in some of these positions. And I don't think it's necessarily an RFK situation, but I would point to Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, who gave an interview on Fox in which they said, I have read the Epstein files. He killed himself.
Yeah.
And the reason why, and I think, look, it got a lot of giggles in certain circles, but I think that it's really, really important. If there is a good part of this in terms of trust in institutions, if you care about institutions and you care about people trusting them, because when you need to lean on them, it's important, then putting in people for which they trust, the biggest skeptics, if they go in and they say, guys, I read the file. There's nothing else that could have happened. He definitely killed himself. I've seen the pictures. Yes, you're always going to have some cranks that'll say, well, they've been compromised by the deep state, but it's going to be less than it was before. And if you do care about institutional trust, that's moving in the right direction. Now,
or are these guys looking at the fact that maybe their boss liked Epstein's Island a little too much?
Well, you might be minting new cranks like Jen. But he's not on the flight logs.
There's pictures with
Trump's
him.
not on the. You know what? I remember.
Yeah, they both
all
lived
of this
in Palm Beach.
Back before this was a thing. Before this was national news. I was trying to get it on the show that I wrote for when I was in television. I didn't break the story, mind you, but it wasn't like big national conversation yet. And the research that I did, they definitely knew each other.
Yeah.
Epstein had like 3 of Trump's phone numbers in his cell phone. So they definitely knew each other. But in terms of the flight log, there's no flight log nor evidence of Trump visiting Epstein Island. There is of Bill Clinton, where Bill Clinton, well, I should say, we don't have evidence that he went to the island, What we have is the flight log of him going on the plane and then dismissing his Secret Service so they could spend time with their family and coming back a few days later.
So I will retract my joke about the island. I will take back the island, but their boss was friends with Epstein, and maybe they got in there and they're like, yeah, he killed himself. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. So
sure. Look, so you might have created
that.
more. My point is that I thought that was a moment. It was a moment that I noted that, like, part of the reason why I think some of these very popular, that weren't just faceless bureaucrats that were benighted by Project 2025, when you put famous people that people know and they follow in these positions and they say these things, it's different. It matters something different. And Dom Bangino had to clown himself, because he comes out and says, guys, if I am telling you this is what happened, and then everybody has all of the highlight reel of him saying Epstein didn't kill himself 50 times on his radio show. That's, I don't know. I felt that was a moment. Now, I don't know if this, to get back to RFK, if this makes Maha people feel more at ease about the vaccine schedule. But if that did happen, I think it would be a measurably better thing if vaccine skeptical people that trust RFK say, all right, he's making these changes here. Now I might trust the MMR vaccine more. Now I might trust the polio vaccine more because he is in charge of it. And we see an uptick in communities that otherwise had not taken it. I think that is a measurable good. I don't know if that's what's happening, but I think that it is a optimistic scenario when you put polarizing people in these positions.
Well, and that's one thing that I think was missed in the New England Journal of Medicine article, is where they did say that the measles vaccine is very safe and we want you all to take it. So that's where that could come into play. And it's a good point.
The big downside to RFK, in my estimation, is I think that he is going to waste a ton of money trying to reconfirm what we already knew about safe vaccines. I think that is a very, very likely scenario where the kind of thing that I was talking about earlier of like, hey, let's cross the T's, dot the I's and all that. He's going to do that for all the stuff that was cleared. Like he's using, like when you listen to him on Rogan and things, he's bringing up stuff that we haven't done for a really long time, like using aluminum as an unguent in order to activate the dead virus. And like we don't do that. It's not a part of it anymore. So I think that, he'll probably waste a lot of money. But we are seeing a uptake in people not taking the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella. That is going up. There has been whether it's institutional decline or cranks or whatever the thing is, there are people that are not doing that. If, and I stress the if bit, if we did skip a bunch of things during COVID for good reason, because we just had to get it out there and we didn't want to cross all the I's and all that, now would be the time to go back to that. And if this is what they're doing, if what they're doing is going back to a methodical way of analyzing the effectiveness of these boosters, then that is good. If they're just doing a bunch of crank, then it's bad.
Let me push back on that, Heaton, when it comes to spending a lot of money on things we don't need to do. I think we do need to do them again.
I do too.
Whether or not they're rudimentary, whether or not it's settled science, I think that we have gotten to a point in which the bespectacled boffins coming out and saying, take it, it's settled science.
Yeah.
It didn't ring well for a lot of people. And so if this is literally just a bunch of trials to reconfirm things that we know, I don't think that that's wasted money. I think that it's probably going to be a good use of money, especially by government standards. It's a good use of money to try to rebuild trust in people that had lost faith in America's ability to recommend things to them, especially when it comes to things of great importance like children and their own health.
Yeah, I'm fine with my tax money going to double checking all the things that make RFK Jr. cranky. And if it makes him less cranky and it makes people more secure in taking the vaccines, like, great. I don't think that's a waste.
If all this ends with everybody being right about vaccines and RFK Jr. just going like, well, now we know. Fine.
Yeah, 100%.
Like I'm totally good with it. We're not wrongpod@gmail.com is where you need to go if you want to write in to this show. Salt Corrector writes, SALT is not a tax credit where you deduct the amount from your federal tax bill. It is a tax deduction where you deduct the amount from your federal taxable income. This makes a pretty big difference in terms of budgetary impact for the federal government. If you are deducting $10,000 in state taxes, you are saving whatever your net tax rate is multiplied by that $10,000. Say if you pay an average of 25% federal income tax rate, you are saving, and the federal government is effectively giving to the state $2,500 with the SALT deductions of $10,000, not giving $10,000 to the state from the federal government.
Yeah. And that was me being wrong about that. So thank you for correcting me. And it makes the math less easy that it's a deduction, because it can move you, like that deduction can move you into an entirely different tax bracket, which can save you a shit ton of money. So it really depends on where you fall. But yeah, you're right about that. Thank you for
I will say that the people who are pushing for this deduction are in no danger of being pushed to another tax bracket.
Well, and that's what
they are way up there.
It's such an expensive thing for the government, and it really is so minuscule for them that I don't understand why they're fighting for this so hard. Like, that's what's really baffling me. Like, why do they want this so badly? Are they just that greedy at this point?
Wait, the people that are
the people that don't want to pay taxes on their house.
This is like 5 mega donors on Long Island that but
it's 40 grand.
They have enough.
They spend 40 grand on wine.
The way that legislation works is you get a toehold and then you push. That's it. That's the way that legislation. So they are saying whatever we can get. The next time that there is a need for 4 Republican votes on this side, we are going to push forward, and they will do so with the Democrats too. So they just need to move that number up. So the next time that they talk about it, they can move that number up higher, if not totally remove the cap.
Yeah, because wasn't it before the tax cut bill? Wasn't it uncapped entirely?
Yep. Yep.
Was it uncapped? I thought it was capped.
No, they created the cap with the Trump tax cuts.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2017?
2017.
Got it. Oh, it was uncapped. Okay. Well,
so I guess that makes sense. If the real goal is to get the cap removed entirely, and so they're just like taking 40 and then they'll just keep pushing and pushing and pushing.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Something I want to point out real quick, and this will come up when we talk about what we're talking about this week, because I really went down a rabbit hole on all this. It's tempting to look at other countries and go, they spend money on building houses, and we don't do that in America. Yeah. And the reality is we spend a lot of money on houses, but we do it on the back end with our tax code, and we do it as a handout to homeowners. Mm-hmm. So we spend lots of tax money in the United States on houses. It's not that we don't do that, but we do it, I would argue, in a way that makes houses more expensive.
And fucks renters entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, I get to bitch. I'm the one who's paying it.
Yeah. Buy a house, man.
No, then I have to stay in one place. Ew.
Good. Then fucking take your hobo ass away from this conversation. I'm here getting these sweet tax breaks. On the Biden cancer stuff, Fit in it writes, instead of age limits, why not take a page from the military and have a fitness test with a scaling score? Can't score a 300 or higher, you're out.
So I like this in theory, but I don't think it would work in practice. So if we're talking about members of Congress, who is the one that's going to be administering this fitness test? It's either going to be their doctor or a doctor employed by the House or the Senate.
Can I pitch an idea for you?
Uh-huh.
The fitness test is administered by 2 people, the American people and a stopwatch, because we are creating an obstacle course. And if you cannot complete the obstacle course under a certain time, you are not allowed to serve in Congress. And this might not be a super onerous obstacle course. Maybe it'll be, and look, we can make certain if you are.
You have to put like a square peg at a square hole and a round peg at a round hole.
We
like
design
triathlon.
We design different ones. If you're handicapped, then we're not going to leave you out. We're not going to make you run the same one that people without the handicap is, but we're going to design one for you. We're gonna design one that will be deterministic to push your limits to the point where we can have an understanding that your blood is pumping at a certain level. We hit the watch. If you're in under the time, you're immediately out of Congress. We put you right on a plane like you're eliminated from a reality show.
I kind
of like this. So there'd be like kind of minimal, like you got to do the thing where you jump through the various tires. You do the hopscotchy bit.
Yep.
Then there's like a folding table, and there's just some math problems. You just what's 24 times 8? Work that out. And then you do the monkey bars.
Yep.
And then you go somewhere else, and it's like a basic logic problem or something like that, and you have to do it under 5 minutes. We come
Congressional
up with
Ninja Warrior.
Oh my God, this would be must-see TV. I'm 100% in. Let's do it.
Okay, you know what? I'm on board. Good job, listener.
We're gonna balance the debt by selling the rights to this show. I've had 2 ideas in the Trump administration to help balance the debt by way of television rights. Can we just sell television rights to the Supreme Court behind the scenes, shoot everything in a way it's never been shot before, just for the first 100 days executive order decisions for Trump? Like, we can, come on, week by week, and all of a sudden you're telling me we're not cutting away to Clarence Thomas and he's got some shit that's going to go viral?
I was about to say, I think Clarence Thomas and Sotomayor are going to be the stars of this show.
Oh my God, $100 million right off the bat. You're telling me Netflix isn't buying it? Get the fuck out of here. Whatever Obama got to not make Netflix shows, double it. We can just do 1 season of the Supreme Court rulings. And the second is Congressional Ninja Warrior. This is going to be gigantic. Secretary of Television Trump.
Congressional fantasy teams, and we can bet on them.
Nice.
Oh, the over-under alone.
Oh yeah.
Hey, gang, I have never once used the phrase late stage capitalism, but are we living in late stage capitalism?
Shut up.
Is this what the end of the Republic
Shut up,
looks
nerd. Like? No one cares. Stuff them in a locker. The Stars at Night writes, howdy. I heard y'all mention the helmet grandfather rule in the NHL. I'm a Dallas Stars fan. They're in the Western Conference Finals right now. One of the remaining 4 teams: Stars, Carolina Hurricanes, Edmonton Oilers, and Florida Panthers. Which one has a player that is still playing without a helmet? The answer is Dallas. The captain, Jamie Benn, being one of 4 remaining players in the NHL, grandfathered into not having to wear a visor. However, once you wear a visor, there is no going back. If you apply that to Congress, if you're over 75 when the law is enacted, if you are in office after the law is enacted, cool beans. If you're voted out, you're done.
All right. So my issue with this sounds like Jamie Benn's kind of got a giant target on his forehead. Like if half the guys on the team aren't wearing helmets, no big deal. If there's one guy in the team without a helmet, I'm going to try and hit him with a hockey puck. I feel like this is really dangerous for that guy now.
Visor.
I'm not going to try, but subconsciously though, I'm like, there's only one dude that can get brained. I'm just saying, like, it's more dangerous when there's only one of you than when there's 50 of you.
Yeah, true. That'd be a pretty tight wrist shot if you could hit somebody in the bridge of their nose without a visor.
Next time I'm in Dallas, I'm going to bring a hockey puck with me in case I see Jamie Benn at a Dave and Buster's or something, so I can throw it at him. Wear a helmet, dipshit.
Jen, what do you think? Getting age limits through the door by grandfathering everybody in.
I don't like it. I think that, no, because the problem is right now. So if we just allow them all stay forever.
They'll never vote for it.
I know, but I don't like it. Because that means for the next generation, these fucks are still in there.
Jen, hold on. Jen, I got a great idea. Okay, listen. 1, we get grandfathered in. 75 years, your grandfather, no problem. 2, I call up some of my buddies at Altria. It's a tobacco company. And we offer free cigarettes in Congress in perpetuity. As many cigarettes as you want. And we call them senior cigarettes. We put Wilford Brimley on the cover of every pack. Maybe we take care of this problem real quick, Jen.
Isn't Wilford Brimley dead?
Yeah, and so will these people.
Oh, I have another television idea that helps solve this problem.
Nice.
As a way to get retirements. So right now, what's our problem? You got a lot of old people that are just gumming up the works here. And they're ancient, and we have no idea if their brain works, but they're obviously just part of an outdated system. But they control so much power within their party, both the person and the party have a hard time thinking about what's going to happen once that person leaves. And now there's a power vacuum. So this one's not going to make money. Unfortunately, no one's going to watch it, but people in DC. So we're going to have to pay. The federal government will have to pay a station to cover it or carry it. But basically, we make the Council of Elders. Now we are enticing. We are paying a big salary to Nancy Pelosi, James Clyburn, Mitch McConnell. You get to sit, you get to be television stars now. It's in DC. It's at a gigantic studio right next to Congress. You're still going to have all the gossip, but now you can actually say stuff out loud without having to be responsible for it. You're going to be able to shape policy in a soft way. But you get, and we make it a real big deal that you're going to get, there's only 4 Council of Elder seats. And so when you are of a big enough deal, you get to go be a big special person that everyone pays attention to. And you don't have to move from DC and go back to your shitty district. This is part of the reason why you're staying in power
Oklahoma.
Anyway. Yeah.
San Placenta,
you never have
Texas.
to do it again. Jim Clyburn, you never have to go back to South Carolina. You can just stay in DC forever. You never have to go back to SF Nancy. Just stay in DC, be a television star. Again, 0 people will watch it outside of Congress. So we're going to have to pay Netflix to cover it. But if we pair it with the deal for Congressional Ninja Warrior, we might be able to get them to carry it as just part of that deal.
I actually really like it because it stokes their ego enough. And I actually do think people would watch it. If I saw Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi off the rails actually fighting and saying the F word, which they do, I would absolutely tune into that every single week.
Yeah, 100%. Also, weirdly, Justin, like, I feel like you're channeling the Roman Republic.
Yeah,
like,
a little bit.
They like their highest level of status that you could obtain was to be a censor, to be in charge of the census. And the only person that we could trust to be a censor was someone who had already previously served as a consul of the Republic. Like when they went into try to deal with the Numidians at one point, or maybe the Carthaginians, they like literally just sent one old censor, just like one 78-year-old dude showed up without an army and was like, fucking back off. And they were like, ugh. So like they were this like incredible like status thing. Maybe we do that.
We need something because they need to feel like their ego. We need to build a golden bridge. That's what I'm saying. Like let's stop trying to shame these ancient people into leaving their power. They're not going to do it. They're going to cling to it until their life is wrested from them. They're all going to be Dianne Feinstein. They're all just going to be limp like a dead fish in their office, and leave everybody else
literally.
So
this make okay, like because the House of Lords now is basically a talk shop think tank. Like the House of Lords is basically a think tank, and I like my British friends fight me on this, where they're like, no, that's not true. It's the upper house, and it's like, no, you have the ability to pause legislation for like a week and go, we don't think it's a very good idea. And then send it back to the House of Commons. And they're like, no, I quite like it. We're going to do it anyway then. And then they send it back and they're like, oh, we're delaying it 2 more days. And they're like, no, overruled. And we're done, right? They can delay things by like a week. But they're basically a think tank with feudal titles. So like if we had like the Council of Elders or whatever we want to call it, and they got to give their floor speeches and they had a research department
better than
they could write white
speeches.
Papers.
Better than floor speeches. It's covered live. And it is out to everybody. And by the way, unfortunately, Jen, you say you watch it once a week. We're going to have to make it 5 days a week. We got to keep people busy. We got to keep them busy. So Monday through Friday, we just have to hear Nancy Pelosi slur through whatever the hell she's doing because she is going to show up tanked. There's no way she's doing that sober.
I think it would have to be a requirement that unless you're a Mormon, you're required to have 3 drinks over the course of the broadcast. Which again is the House of Lords. The House of Lords is just our Senate
no
with
one's
funny accents
allowed
and a
to
5-drink minimum.
Mitch McConnell, no matter how long he's not speaking. It just dead air. Like you just get to do because you're a council of elder. That's it.
Yeah, I just finished that book you gave me, Fight, which has all these inside quotes. And the way these people talk is so Veep. And I want to see it. I hate that they go on television and they pretend to be like sophisticated people that never swear. Like, shut up. That's such a lie. I want to see them with no reason to be politically cautious. Ever
Right.
again.
It has to be on Netflix. It's got to be.
Can't be cable.
Can't be. Well, my pitch when I first made this was on C-SPAN, but I don't think C-SPAN would want that level of cursing. Although maybe.
I think C-SPAN wouldn't give a fuck. We've met them.
I know.
If it's unfiltered, like their whole thing is democracy unfiltered.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
They'd allow it.
I don't want to brag, but I know Howard Mortman. And now that I live in DC, I fucking bail that guy out of jail twice a fucking week. And he cusses like a sailor. Great dude. Big fan.
Nicest guy.
Big fan of Howard.
Nicest guy.
Nicest guy. Cannot imagine him doing that.
He shouldn't drive.
Oh God. I can't remember what I was going to say. Anyway,
I think it's a brilliant idea, Justin. I fully endorse it.
I've come around on this. Good job, Justin. Good job, Justin.
I'm programming 2 shows already. This is great.
You're a busy man.
Term limit suggestion writes 3 terms for senators, 9 for Congress. I think I could go up to 4 for Senate and 12 for Congress. That's 18 to 24 years, which is a normal government career. Also, if you're healthy, run for something else. Go between Congress and the Senate or governor.
Yeah, something like that. Another
so
option
basically,
would
you're
be
just cutting out the like super stragglers, which would include everybody that I just mentioned that would be on the Council of Elders.
Or maybe like, I don't know. There's lots of things we could play with. Just you could like, okay, in Oklahoma, we don't have term limits for governors, but we do have a rule that you got to sit one out. So George Nye, who's a great man and whose eyebrows are visible from space, good dude, Governor Nye. He was governor like 4 times, something like that. But he like served the last year of another guy's, and then he did a term that he won, then he sat out, and then he ran again. But there's a chance for people to come in. It breaks up the establishment. It breaks up the incumbent advantage there. The other thing you could do is just combine it and say you can only serve in Congress for a total of 24 years. You can adjudicate that however you want. You can go in the House, you can go in the Senate, but once you've hit 24 years, you're done. Whatever we make that number.
Well, and I like it because when I just think about what that would look like if we had that now, it would mean that all of the people that voted for the war on terror would be out by next year. And I think that'd be a good thing for this country. Yeah. But it's not what we have right now. So whatever gets them out.
Although you do want to make sure you don't set them too low. Like Jen, you would know California better than me, but didn't they put term limits in at one point in the legislature?
I have no idea.
But like I think this was California where they put in term limits, but the term limits were really restrictive. It was like 8 years or something like that. And the result was that no one was around long enough to figure out where the money was. Like, so you do have to have long enough for their,
Yeah, the argument against term limits is it doesn't make wiser Congress people. It makes more powerful lobbyists because they are the people who actually know how things are run. And so they wind up leading a bunch of inexperienced Congress people around by the nose. So,
but then if there's a lot of people changing, then how things are run changes as well. So that's where I don't buy
This is why I like Heaton's super complicated term limits algorithm plan. Here's how it works.
Okay.
The first time you get in, you have to win in the top 2 by 50% plus 1. And then after 2 terms, you got to get 60% in the top 2. 3 terms, 70%, settles at like 75%. But the longer you're there, you have to get a higher amount of the votes.
If
we lived in a nation of very wonky autistic people, I think my system would work super well.
P writes,
and if RFK's right about the vaccines.
Heaton's comment as an anthropomorphic prostate saying, I am making pee had me cracking up and reminded me of the old meme, pee is stored in the balls. I'm a doctor and I didn't realize that some people might actually think that the prostate is responsible for making and or storing pee.
Yep, that's what I was going for. I'm glad I brought you joy.
I legit don't know what your prostate does.
I think it's like a sphincter for your urethra. Like, I think it's hey, doctor, right into Justin.
Doctor, tell us.
I'm pretty sure it's the thing that clamps down on your urethra when you're peeing. And that's why older guys have a harder time peeing because their prostate's engorged. So it's harder to get through. And also it's not supple. Now I've got a nimble, supple prostate of a 28-year-old. But as dudes get older, they turn into like chestnuts or something. And they gotta like instead of pissing, they just drain. That's all out of a textbook. There you go. Wow. Good job, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Heath.
Yep.
We're Not Wrong is a production of Dog and Pony Show Audio. Our editor is Will Saddleberg. On PX3 this week, we do a little bit of a deep dive into Nancy Mace, one of the most colorful stories of Congress. Indeed, if Donald Trump were not such a news machine, she would probably be a little bit more front and center, considering the fact that she showed a naked silhouette of herself during congressional testimony a week ago. But
she's nuts.
I have some off the record gossip that I can tell you guys.
I'm in a text chain with her and Howard Mortman in the amount of nude pics that she sends us is just, does this make me look fat? And we're like, haha, you're naked. What are you doing?
Yeah, Nancy Mace talk. And then Friday, we've got Kirk Beto of National Journal and Hotline on to discuss the Democratic Party spending $20 million to understand the syntax of men. And a great Substack writer, Catherine D., who writes about internet subcultures. And this is a little bit more of a serious discussion about some of the darker corners of the internet, specifically in light of a politically motivated IVF bombing that happened 2 years ago and the subculture that it came from on the internet. You can go ahead and listen to that on Friday's edition. Mr. Heaton.
I go down a massive rabbit hole on housing policy. This got sparked by our show, by the way, because we did one, I think it was a bonus episode on why California is so expensive, maybe a fortnight back. And I got really interested in that. And so I wanted to figure out, well, how do other countries do housing? And so I'm doing a two-parter on my show. The first part, I look at the older Cuban model as to kind of establishing one end. I look at Japan. I tell what we do that's different. And then on the next episode, I do Dutch housing, Swiss housing. Singapore is a really interesting model. Just kind of go through all the variants of how countries tend to housing policy. So if you want to nerd out on housing policy and why housing is expensive in America and what we could potentially do, including, I want to add, one place I'm not going to name, one place that has socialist housing that I think actually works pretty well, that gave me a lot of cognitive dissonance. You can find that on The Political Orphanage.
I like it.
Fucking less than a year in DC and he's already turning red. Jen, your thoughts?
So I'm still working on the next public episode, but I released a Patreon episode last night that was so unhinged that I almost didn't air it. Even in the episode, there's twice where I'm like, I can't air this, but I aired it because I was doing Last Week in Congress and I was in a mood and I didn't want to do it. And then I read the Daily Digest and just saw Republicans continuing in one resolution after another to make our environment more toxic. And I just lost my shit. So if you're a Republican, you'll hate it, but like, you're not really listening to me anyway. But if you're frustrated with the Trump administration, want to hear someone yell like a nut, go check out my Patreon because I got real mad. And
resistance porn,
I guess. But yeah, so you'll find out what happened last week in Congress, but you'll get it with me being my spiciest.
Mad.
A little crazy.
Big mad.
Yeah. I have to lose it sometimes. And sometimes I do it publicly.
Yeah. Do it for money if you're going to do it.
Mine has Godzilla.
For That's housing policy?
Yeah. It's entitled How Godzilla Fixed the Housing Crisis.
Okay. Is that racist? Is it Japan related?
Yeah, because a lot of it's about Japan. But I'm pretty sure because I'm saying Japan's so awesome, you can't get mad at me.
Godzilla's an iconic movie figure. If you go to Shinjuku, they have a giant Godzilla next to one of their movie theaters.
The Japanese are so fun.
Yeah.
They like.
I really want to go over there someday.
I meant to put this in the intro, but this will be an outro little mini topic. But I put this in the We're Not Wrong group chat. King Charles doing a land acknowledgement while giving a throne speech in Canada. Like, what a moment in time. What a moment in time that Canada, nominally part of the United Kingdom Empire, is saying, like, this is the unconquered land of the Indian tribe. Oh,
the lack of self-awareness is just
I think it's one of those things where it's like, what is polite society in any era? And like, also how weak is the British crown that somebody would say like, oh, you have to say this. And the king would be like, oh, well, of course. As opposed to like, I'm the king. I talk to God. I am invested with God's own choice of sovereignty. No, intern, I'm not reading the land acknowledgement. Eat it. I'm on a throne. I wear a crown. I'm God's choice. Fuck
but
you.
I wonder how much Charles's son basically telling Oprah that he's a racist had to do with the weird decisions that he's making.
Maybe.
Because now Harry's trying to walk it back, but Meghan's not.
This was the fun part about Prince Philip is he did not give a fuck. Prince Philip, when he was running around, like woke up every day, was an unrepentant 1920s cartoon character of a rich vampire. And they'd be like, Your Highness, you really shouldn't say that particular racial epithet. When you went to Barbados and literally, I'm not making this up, asked the president if he was descended from a pirate, that was not particularly good. And Prince Philip would be like, I'm fucking the queen. Go away. Yeah. I stoop the queen.
To the hilt.
By the way, I was over there when the queen died, and can I do my queen character for you? That's going to piss off some of the British listeners. So this is my queen character. Right, I'll wake up in the morning and I'll get like some Snickers and I put it in a blender with gin. Then I smoke some fags and I like have to talk to Parliament because I'm apparently the head of the church, but not all of them. Just the one we've got with the pale people. Anyway, I would just do that. Just this like kind of like chavvy drunk. It was great fun. And you can really see where people's politics were depending on how they responded to that.
Yeah. My favorite queen story is the last time that we were in London. We were staying in Soho, and our hotel lobby was a bunch of people that come from various other parts of England to go see the Broadway, their version of Broadway, right? West End. Sorry, not Soho, West End. We're in the West End. And so there's these people from, the middle of England that are down there, and they had just seen Kinky Boots or some shit. And they were like, we got to talking, and we were talking about the Queen. And we were like, oh, what do you think about the crown? And she's like, I don't think she cares. I don't think she cares at all. No, she's just wash off her back. She's a great woman. She's just an amazing woman. Now, we've all had a few drinks at this point. And then toward the end, it's one older lady and then her daughters that had gone to see the show. But they're like signaling to Ashley and I, like, she will not shut up about the Queen. If you keep talking about the Queen, she'll keep defending the Queen. And so at the end, it was like, all right, we got to leave. The one thing we can all agree is that she killed Epstein, right? And I don't know if she heard me, but she immediately was like, oh, well, of course. Anyway, for Jen Briney and Andrew Heaton, I'm Justin Robert Young. We're not wrong. Epstein's corpses.
Dog and Pony Show audio.